My mom uses my locked private diary and only true safe space as her daily reading material. Welcome back, but if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. When I was a preteen, my mom gifted me a diary with a tiny lock and keys. I hid the keys, taped them in hidden places, and began using it almost immediately. I was a bookworm and loved reading and writing. I was also quite neglected as a child, so my diary was the only place I could express myself and feel heard. I'd read my last entries, and that allowed me to reflect on my own thoughts and actions and learn from past situations. It was honestly really great for my mental health. For a time, my mood and mental health improved. Time passed, I couldn't tell you how long, probably a few months. Shortly after I wrote an entry talking about my first wet dream, a few seconds of feet peeking out of bed sheets, nothing truly not safe for work, my mom got furious at me and confronted me, full on screaming. She sat me in the living room as she towered over me, screaming at my face, asking me if I thought this was normal, that I was having depraved thoughts no child my age should have. For a preteen, really, it was actually perfectly normal. That I had promised no intimacy before marriage when I was 5 years old, and that this was clearly going against my word, that I was, etc., etc. I tried to defend myself at first and protest, not understanding how she even knew about it, but she took out the unlocked diary as proof of my depravity, and my attempts at defending myself, it was just a dream, just fueled her anger more. I sat there crying, answering quietly, whatever she wanted me to say to whatever she asked, because nothing else would stop her escalation of screaming. I felt betrayed. My locked diary was my only safe space at home. I was careful with what I wrote in my diary after that incident, and I set a few tests to check if I was still having my locked diary read without my knowledge or consent. I did this by writing about innocuous incidents in a way that could have sounded like it was more than it was, knowing it would prompt questions out of curiosity. Every time. It didn't take more than 2 days for the questions to come. Turns out, she'd hunt for my diary's keys and read it regularly. Needless to say, I stopped using my diary. My only breathing space had been turned against me. I significantly closed myself off from everyone. I felt if even my diary could betray me, then people would too. It was hard not writing. I no longer had an outlet for emotional or psychological relief, but I really couldn't trust anything anymore. After a week or two without any new entries, my mom asked why I'd stopped using my diary. If I had dared, I'd have rolled my eyes and asked, "Why do you think?" But I knew better than to attract attention to myself and simply said I had lost interest in such a thing. Edit, I really should mention that this was 20 years ago for those who are concerned. I'm in a really good place now. I put my details in the comments, but I felt I should mention that it's old news here in the main post. Number 1, how do you feel so brazen to do that to your own child? And number 2, how could you not get that after you literally went off and made a big deal out of nothing, that this child obviously wasn't going to write her diary anymore when it was clear that you were just using this as a tool to spy on her, not give her a safe outlet for her thoughts. This wasn't going to help. But I'm glad OP's fine, and she's been okay. My mom did this to both of my older siblings with their diaries. She would talk about the contents of the diaries to her friends during their visits, even in front of my siblings. I never kept one because I saw the effects of it. As a result, I still can't get myself to note down even important information because of the distrust of written evidence I got from my mom. Counseling is helping, but that distrust is real deep set. I don't really have a diary, but for your mom to disrespect your privacy is an ultimate slap to the face, and she is obviously failing you as a parent. She has no right to be looking through your private stuff, especially without your consent. Just cut contacts with her for your sake. I hope and pray you're doing better. Thanks so much for your support. This was a long time ago, and you're right. She did fail as a parent for me. I see my sister more as a mom than my actual mom. It's kind of sad, but very true. If my mom hadn't changed and grown tons since then, I definitely would be no contact today. After much self-growth, I'm in a good enough place now that I can recognize that I did, in fact, suffer neglect and abuse. I was resentful and angry for a long time, but I can recognize now that while my mom and dad were very far from the parents I would have liked to have, they came from even worse homes and gave me much better than what they had. They say it takes 3 generations to end the cycles of abuse. My parents started the healing by removing us from poverty and hunger and removing the worst of the abuse. Dad was made to sleep with the dogs outside for years, for being home late by 1 minute. Made to sleep with a sex worker at age 12 so that he could become a man. Beaten for any reason, stuff like that. My parents may have been toxic, but they gave me the best they could give. I look back on their parenting as the uneducated and misguided attempts at being good parents. I'm still low contact because I'm still healing, but I'm in a better place now. And they too have grown so much since then. It's very encouraging for the future. I'm pregnant now, can't wait to be the parent I always wanted to have for my child. I've been preparing my whole life for this. My child will have a home based on love and understanding, a place of peace and kindness. I didn't have a diary growing up, but one day I wrote on pieces of paper my plans to go meet a friend, female, and go see a movie. I went, had fun, and came home, and my mom asked me who I went to the movies with. I told her. She usually wouldn't let me come and go with the full inquisition, but then she said I was lying, that I wasn't at the movie, that I was with a boy. I said I wasn't lying. Why would I even lie about that? I was super introverted as a preteen. I only had 2 friends and no male attention at all. But she was adamant I was lying. And to prove I was wrong, she said someone had seen me. I was flabbergasted. How could someone see me go somewhere with a boy? So I asked her who had seen me. She avoided the question until she eventually said my cousin saw me. I said I wanted to talk to her because I know who I was with and where. I wanted to question her myself. At that point, my mom had to admit she found the paper. And because my handwriting is terrible, she read, "Today I'm going to the movies with my best friend," as "Today I'm going to go," unreadable, "with my boyfriend." Her face when I read it the right way was just so funny I couldn't even be mad. But I knew at that point I couldn't trust her with my actual diary when I got one. The amount of parents who go too far and invade their children's privacy, not really thinking that they deserve privacy or that because they gave birth to this child or they had this child, that child doesn't deserve privacy. I get that you're trying to watch out for your kid, and that's fine, but there should be an already established level of trust where you shouldn't feel like you have to snoop into your child's diary. Unless you're in a really, really unsafe neighborhood or a really, really unsafe place, country, or environment or whatever, then I would understand. But if your child's not at risk, then what was the point of you reading their diary? What was the point of you snooping in to the intricacies of their child life? They're teens, children, or younger. They have nothing really going on. Unless you're worried about them, there should be no reason for you to do that. And if you're worried about them, have a serious conversation. Not just question them and then lead the whole thing with lies and assumptions. Ask very direct questions. Children are people, and they always have been and will be too. I also think a lot of parents don't really think about the consequences of this because they only think about their position as the parent instead of thinking, oh, this is a person that's going to grow up one day and be able to not talk to me if they don't want to, that maybe they should build a relationship with a foundation of trust and clear communication. I don't think they really think about the fact that low contact is an option. I think in their heads that their child is never going to leave them, they're not going to stop talking to them one day. It doesn't even cross their mind. But what happens when that responsibility is no longer there? What happens when that child becomes their own person? That's a really effed up thing to do to a child, especially if it's systematic and unwarranted. I can relate to that situation as my mother, Latina women think they own their kids, really thought she was entitled to all my private information. She wasn't really a bad mother. She was a product of her childhood and tried to do right by us. Just her concept of right was a little skewed. Even at a young age and with this type of upbringing, which conditions us to accept it as normal, I knew this was fundamentally wrong. People need to be able to have safe spaces where they are not judged, condemned, or even questioned. It is healthy. I have 2 tween kids, a 12-year-old male and a 13-year-old female, and I would never invade their privacy like that unless absolutely necessary, like if I see signs of abuse, substance use, etc. And before even thinking that, I would have to reach out to them multiple times myself and through others. Then I might contemplate breaching their privacy. I lead my life based on the fact that we should never forget where we come from and never try to deny the bad things that happen to us, for the sum of our experiences makes us who we are. I analyze, synthesize, and try not to repeat the mistakes of those who came before me or my own.